Hey everybody, Edo here, and today for my Q&A, I have Sebas Koziner, who is the graphic designer on Legendary Creatures, but also hailing from Argentina. Say hello, Sebas.
Hello to everybody.
And so, working with graphic designers, it's been interesting working with you and hearing your story, given that you're based in Argentina and you're not quite in the US base and you're not in Europe and Canada. And so, to start, can you take us through sort of your background in graphic design and video games and sort of how you got into it?
Well, I started as an artist, actually not making graphic design, but art, illustration on video games because I'm a pixel artist, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to make games for Nintendo. There wasn't actually any industry in Argentina. The studio I working in was the first, so I'm always working on the first in Argentina because there's
Sure.
not much industry here. We made a cool game for Game Boy Advance at the time, then Nintendo DS, and then the mobile industry come along, and I moved to make a game called The Sandbox. It was pretty well taken. Was nominee for Best App a few years around. So that
Okay.
was
Good.
that was my experience on video games.
Mm-hmm. And so
Um,
how did that then transition into board game and graphic design or even illustration and graphic design and board games? Like how did you move over into the industry? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, actually, the last game I worked, the Sandbox, the company was French and was working in Argentina, but hiring Argentinian people, but the bosses were from France, and they played war games. They made
Yeah.
me play war games with them in the time. They thought, hey, game designers should know board games because it's like prototyping and having ideas on pencil. That was very important for them. So they kind of make us play a lot, and then I started to have a lot of games ideas. But I'm no programmer, so I couldn't make it video games. But making board games sounded just pretty awesome for me.
Yeah, and just to speak to, from my experience in video games, that sort of paper prototyping of gameplay and mechanics is a
Yeah,
super awesome tool set. That was something that in different design teams I've worked on, we did that. And it really helps you quickly understand and think through how mechanics and dynamics play together in your game before investing all the time and effort into engineering and building and the art side of things altogether. Also, as we moved into free to play and mobile games, we often did a lot of flow charting and
yeah.
e-commerce diagramming that went along with the pen and paper stuff. So even in video games, it's a good tool set. But so the French came, they said, "Hey man, you're missing out on this whole board game thing. Play some
Yeah.
board games." You play it, and then you're like, "Hey, I'd love to do board game design and make some stuff." So what did you do then?
Well, when I worked there, I started to have ideas, like I said, not just as an artist, but also as a game designer. And after that, shows ended, I opened my own studio for a few years with a friend. And every time I had an idea for a video game we made together, I kind of wished to make it more on paper than on video game because it was a lot faster for me to have an idea on paper and board games than how to talk to my programmer friend and make him do stuff. We worked for 3 years making games like for Cartoon Network and stuff like that. And I actually, at the end, I just hated making video games, and I wanted to. No, I want to make board games. I don't know why I'm wasting my time on video games.
Cool. Well, many would agree with you, and certainly board games, being WYSIWYG, like what you see is what you get, is really invigorating. I know I've worked with a lot of in the games I've made, brought in video game artists, and that whole not having to deal with any of the programming, engineering, sort of layout piece of screens, and just being able to be like, this is exactly how this card looks every
Yeah,
time, is super super it's a very different experience in the field. And then being able to hold it and play with it, right?
Yeah, and actually, I'm a graphic designer, so for me, making it look cool is pretty easy. So make my ideas was really fast, and I'm married to an awesome artist, so she uh, provide me with art. Actually, I started to make graphic design on board games because we designed together a board game in Argentina and published it through a site called idea.me. That's the same as Kickstarter, but for Latin America, and was the first board game published by crowdfunding in Latin America here. So after that, I loved so much to do the printing stuff for my own game that I kind of slowly stopped making art and started to make more graphic design and say, hey, I can do this. I really like this. I could live making this.
Right, and so that's this transition moment, right? And I interview a lot of people who have transitioned into the board game space, and it's that moment where you're starting to do the work. You're full time or part time on another job. You're doing it on the side, and then at some point you say, I think I can transition. I can move over.
Yeah.
And so, when did you start taking work for hire, contract graphic design with other board game publishers and designers?
Well, actually, to gain experience, I made a lot of free work at the beginning. I got into Board Game Geek, check people looking for graphic designers for stuff, and say, hey, that's a simple task. I can make it you for cheap or free, just to gain some experience. I do that for 3-4 games. And after that, I started to feel a little more comfortable and started to make cheap work, just not free, but cheap work in games I trusted, not in every game I could take. Say, hey, this is a cool game, you have a cool artist, I can work here.
Right.
So mainly was Board Game Geek, who has a long list of people looking for graphic designers there.
And that's a really important piece I want to talk about a little bit, because there's always a sensitivity to this idea of whether it's game design, art, reviews, anything. Whenever you do something for free, there are a lot of people who throw stones and say, hey, why are you doing this for free? You should be charged. That person's taking advantage. It's not for the experience.
Yeah.
My career has been a lot about helping people and working with people and gaining experience. And it seems to me that if working with people, giving your time to gain the experience, gain the know-how, and assist and team up on projects, it builds your resume, it builds your experience, and then you're able to then transition into paid work as you go, right? I mean, it seems, because, I mean, when I hired you, I certainly had to pay you. So you certainly had to move into professional work. I mean, how did you deal with sort of knowing when you were going to say, okay, now I need to start charging, and now I want to charge more, and now I want to charge as much as this person? How do you make that judgment call along the way?
Well, I started to get shows. There are a steady flow of shows. That's one hand, because I have a particular case. I started to publish my own games in Argentina. I published 3 games here. And I said, okay, my studio is something I just don't want to work there anymore, and decided to rent an office and say, okay, I will sell my games strongly, start to be a real publisher, and see if I can get more and more shows on graphic design. I initially thought I will be more a publisher than a graphic designer, but it ended up just the opposite.
Well, did you find out that a lot of it's hard to make money as a publisher sometimes? It's almost, you can just take graphic design jobs, but keeping it going on the publisher.
It wasn't actually that hard in Argentina because there are so few people publishing cool games that I got just a little edge here. But at the same time, we have a shitty economy. Sorry for the word, but that's true. And people started to have less money to buy.
Right.
That's a sad part. But on the other hand, I got a lot of good work outside. I started to work with Steve Finn. I actually made some free help for him in the Butterfly Garden. He liked how I work with him, and we started to develop a really cool relationship, work relationship, and started to make more games with him. And that kind of opened me several doors. So at the same time, the publishing gone down, the graphic design gone great because I actually love Steve Finn design. I'm a fan of videos. So
Right, and
it's like a little dream.
and in a way, right, that's how we got connected, because the little
Yeah.
other side of the story, right, for Legendary Creatures was originally this was actually being graphic designer was Ben Shulman, who I just did a Q&A with,
Yeah.
and Ben got super busy because of Gameland Games and ran out of time, and I was looking for a graphic designer, and so I actually I had a lot of the illustration and really high expectations for what I wanted to have happen in the game with the overall, the look and the feel and the all just the whole vibe of it, right? And what I did was I started sourcing designers. I said, "Hey, who knows anyone who's able to do work available?" And a number of people made recommendations. Steve did as well. Steve said, "Hey, I've been working with Sebas. He's awesome. I recommend him." And I actually then all the people who I was considered, I asked to do paid tests. So I said, I want to see who can do what I'm looking for. I'm going to ask you to do work. I want to, it's not free. Do this test for me. Basically, it was the layout for a single card. Let's take a look. And I considered 4 or 5 different graphic designers. And for me, it was a combination of you being in the sweet spot from what I wanted, but also that recommendation from Steve. Knowing another publisher who's worked with somebody goes a long way. And so that was really a big deal.
Yeah, actually, I'm currently I have kind of not search for work anymore because recommendation is the main source of work I have. After I finish a project and people like the project, several other game designers ask the designer, "Hey, who was your designer?
Who did it?" Yeah.
That who did it fact is the main source of work, and it actually have started to decline work lately, first time, and it was really awesome when a game like game like the people like the game you work in.
Right.
That's pretty awesome feeling too.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think you do a great job. So, so when somebody they'll ask me, well, who did the graphic design in Legendary Creatures, and I'll say, hey, Sebas did it, and you should check him out, and here's his information, right? And so you've sort of rolled through that. You were an artist in another industry. You learned about games. You started doing it. You did some on your own. I haven't played all your games. I've played Mutant Crops, which I think is fantastic.
Right.
I don't know. I know there was a Kickstarter to bring it to the States. I don't know if it's come out yet in the States, or where is it at?
I sent the files to print yesterday.
Fantastic.
So it's coming along.
I'm very curious to see how that does. Agricola super light, and with creepy crops. And so you've been picking up the graphic design work and moving for there. How, one thing I'm curious about is just Argentina in general. What's the board? There was a time when you were, sort of, it was introduced to you from the French, and then you started a little company, and you made your first Kickstarter type. It wasn't Kickstarter, whatever it was called, and published Argentinian board game. Is the scene growing? What's it like down there?
It's growing very fast, very fast. At the time, I published my first game, who's called Oni, who also has a successful Kickstarter. You can actually get it in USA. When I published that game here, there was just a version of, we didn't play test it at all, going around for a single publisher, another original idea, but not much games. They were still playing Monopoly. There was actually no game in industry or local scene outside what we were making. But At the same time I started with that, a few other games were published by smaller publishers like Super Indie. And when I made the crowdfunding, people said, "Hey, this guy is making a game and he just put it out of nowhere and got funded, so we may do it too." And that was like a snowball. Really good people started to work on games and other projects that were kinda in the mind of the bigger publishers. Say, "Hey, these guys are making some money with that. We should launch that game. We have the idea." So it was like a snowball effect.
Right.
And at the same time, game meetings started to show up. There's a group called Geek Out here in Argentina, and Geek Out made reunions first with a few people, then hundreds, now thousands. Got the sponsorship of the government and big cultural centers opening our doors. So right now in Argentina is really growing. There's a lot of games publishing this year, but we really cannot know how everything will go.
Sure.
Because
Well, I'm hearing a lot more about business in South America, whether it's Argentina, Mexico, Brazil. That growing industry, that growing interest, and I think it's a combination of people playing games from other countries, South America grown games, and a combination of things. So it's super interesting and compelling. Well, go ahead.
One important thing I want to say about that is Buenos Aires, the city I live, is a very big city. It's over 10 million people, and it's highly cultural. It's a place in Latin America. It's one of the highest culturally. Lot of bookstores, lot of teachers. There's a huge public for games that they didn't knew board game existed. That this new generation of board game existed. When a few people knew about it, they just love it.
Right.
And it's just like a spark that started.
Awesome. Well, so to close out, again, being a graphic designer, or just, an artist and all the different things, but specific to graphic design, you've, not working in the States or in Europe, sort of coming, being from an area that isn't as big on games, and now, and it's changing, you just explained to that, but how, what would your advice be to somebody who wants to do this work and become a graphic designer? It sounds like getting out there, getting started, and working on projects, but how would you put it?
I think it's very hard to make a statement in that sense, because it will sound super simple, but you just have to start making games. Because a lot of graphic designers I know, I would love to be hired to make a board game, and people won't hire if they don't see you can't make something that's good. So either for free or for yourself or for whatever reason, you should start building up your profile to show you can do great board games, to have a page, a profile with good samples. And after you get 1, 2, 3 shops that actually make a successful Kickstarter, not a big hit, but people can buy the box with your name in the back, at least, or in the rules. That's the starting point. It is not easy to make a living out of it just right away. You have to build it. Right. But if you have that in mind, I think the only people who's really making money out of board game industry right now are graphic designers and artists, because we get paid. Publishers get a little profit. Only the ones that make a hit, they really live from board games. But regular publishers, out of the 40 games you can see in Kickstarter, not all of that games will make money for the people publishing. but artists and graphic designers will, because you will get paid for your job.
Right,
So
right. I mean, and that I sort of feel the same way sometimes, where you have a combination of back end deals and upfront people, and most of the time, people work, different contracts are different groups, but a lot of times, you're used to the graphic design or the art usually gets paid in upfront or as it happens. Manufacturers and board game builders and makers, the actual stuff, they also are doing very well right now. But
yeah,
but again, I mean, Legendary Creatures, it's got live on Kickstarter now, and it's a game that is going to hopefully be fantastic and
yeah,
be a good show off piece, and everything comes well. I've been thrilled with your work, and thanks for all the support and information. So
yeah.
you know,
Well, one thing I want to say about Legendary Creatures is actually uh, all the building I was talking about. It's nice when someone says, "Okay, now you have time to make something and spend a month working fully on a game." It's that the point that should be desired for any graphic designer, to have the full time to make really your work shine.
awesome.
So it's nice to see the game out there, because it was actually that for me, and it's like the culmination of a series of steps I've taken.
Awesome. Well, it worked for me. So anyway, so everyone subscribe, share. Hope you make some great games. Thanks for joining us, Sebas. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.